Okay, I think we should start. So this is our third and final colloquium for Taiwan program this quarter. So welcome to our event today. I'm Gi Shin. I'm director of Shorenstein Asia-Pacific Research Center, and also I'm now leading our new Taiwan program. So I'm really happy to have this event and conversation with three leaders of Taiwan studies in the country. As you know, we established Taiwan program this fall. So this is the first quarter for our Taiwan program. So looking back, I went to graduate school in 1980s. Actually at the University of Washington. And at the time, it's all about Japan. I think maybe young people may not understand. It's all about Japan, and then some discussions about Korea and Taiwan as kind of side to Japan. So in my cohorts, we got one from Japan, one from Taiwan, and I'm from Korea at the time. And then, what happened to Japan? So with the sloping economy of Japan, attention to or interest in Japan kind of declined over the years. And then, you know what happened, right? The rise of China. It's all about China for the next few decades. But somehow, Korea was able to manage to get some attention, maybe because of North Korea. I think Taiwan has been forgotten almost completely for the next few decades. But then in recent years, more attention to Taiwan. And we are very happy to establish a Taiwan program at the center. But even before that, there are some places in the country that still were working on Taiwan. And I'm really happy to have three leaders of Taiwan studies in the country. So I'm going to briefly mention their work. So we have Professor Bill Laverly from University of Washington. So it's my alma mater in terms of my PhD. And what year you joined the department? I think we overlapped 85? Okay. So I left in 91, so we kind of overlap several years. So he's a professor of international studies and sociology, also director of the East Asia Center, and the chair of the Taiwan Study Program at the University of Washington. So great to have you here today, Bill. And then Professor Wei-Shin Liu, she's a professor of sociology and faculty affiliate of Asia-Pacific Center at UCLA. So actually, I was at UCLA before moving to Stanford, before defecting to the north. So very, very, very good to have you. And then finally, Professor Howard Chang, who is Lai Ho and Wu Cho Liu Endowed Chair in Taiwan Studies, and Professor of East Asia Language and Culture Studies, and Director of the Center for Taiwan Studies at UC Santa Barbara, my favorite place to visit. So I'm really happy to have all three leaders today. So I think each of them will be sharing their views and experience in doing or promoting Taiwan studies at their own institution and in the country. So I think each will be speaking for about maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And then I have some conversation with them before opening up to you for Q&A. So let's welcome our guests today.
The University of Washington Taiwan Studies program was conceived over a decade ago by a group of China studies faculty. And we had all had experiences with Taiwan, and some of us had even done a study of Taiwan back in the days when Taiwan was considered a remote frontier of Chinese society and one of the only places one could go to study rural China. We had different reasons for believing that Taiwan was a worthy as an object of study and important. But one thing we all shared was an affection for Taiwan. And we felt a kind of urgency that we started Taiwan Studies program before we all retired and gave it over to scholars who actually had less experience with Taiwan than we did. We envisioned a program that had several elements. And one was a program that was strongly institutionalized and not just a temporary pop-up program. We envisioned a program that stood on equal footing with China program or a Japan program or a Korea program. And we wanted a program that had research capability, particularly in the social sciences. We wanted to help shape the field of Taiwan studies. And I have to say with some kind of sheepish humility that at that time we really knew very, very little about Taiwan studies. We wanted to start a degree program in Taiwan studies that would train a generation of Taiwan studies specialists. So to make a long story short, we raised some money and convinced the College of Arts and Sciences to create a tenure track position in Taiwan studies. And that's how the program got its start. So I'm going to just mention a few of the milestones of our program. It was 2016 when the college approved a search for a Taiwan studies specialist. In 2017, we hired James Lin, an historian of modern Taiwan. In 2018, we started our Taiwan New Book Talk series. And I'll say a little more about all of these things. In 2020, we started our YouTube channel and we started our program in-house videography. In 2021, we started a program called the Arts and Culture Program, which was funded by the Taiwan Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In 2022, we had a big event. We hosted the Fourth World Congress of Taiwan Studies. And in 2024, we published our first volumes in our University of Washington Press, Taiwan and the World monograph series. And in 2025, well, we're not there yet, but we are starting our MA degree in East Asian Studies with a Taiwan Studies track. I'm going to describe how we do these things, and I'm going to put some emphasis on our collaborations with Taiwan institutions and with other Taiwan programs. So I'll start with our book talk series. This is just our series for this year, so we have 8 events so far. We've been through 3 of them, and these are kind of the backbone of our activities in the Taiwan studies thing. This is, we lay this out in advance, and then we add things to the schedule more or less on an opportunistic basis, or when events arise, such as elections in Taiwan and such things as this. We have curriculum in Taiwan studies. We generally offer 4 or 5 Taiwan studies classes per year. Now, this last year, James Lin taught 3 of these classes. We had Professor of Communications, Yuan Xiao, teach a novel course, and then we have some other courses on East Asia studies that have Taiwan content, and we count those. So we have environmental issues in East Asia. And although James Lin's courses tend to stay steady, the other curriculum changes from year to year. We get about 20 to 30 students in undergraduate courses and around 5 graduate students in seminars. We also have some study abroad courses, which are really great. These take students from the University of Washington to Taiwan in the summertime for course credit. We have the environmental course, and we have the design course that are taught by faculties in the College of Art and also in the College of Environment. And these not only take students to do things in Taiwan, like hands-on things, but they are actually integrated with Taiwan students in Taiwan universities. So these collaborations involve, let's see, for the environment class, it's with the Taiwan University Department of Geography, and the design class involves students and faculty at Shijian University in Taipei and Chunggong University in Tainan. I have to mention our new degree program in East Asia Studies with a Taiwan track, which is not yet completely formalized, but it's going to be soon. Before, we had 3 MA programs in China, Japan, and Korea studies. And this is going to be replaced by an MA in East Asia Studies with a China track, Japan track, Korea, Taiwan track. And I just want to note that this really puts Taiwan studies administratively on an equal footing with China, Japan, and Korea programs. And Taiwan studies can recruit MA students, collaborate on cross-track courses, and co-administer the degree along with these other programs. The first cohort will enter in fall of 2025. I mentioned the UW Press Taiwan in the World monograph series. Here's our first monographs. We have a Taiwan Lives, which is a kind of a undergraduate history textbook, which by Mickey Alsford, and it's based on short biographies of people in Taiwan. Then we have Good Wife, Wise Mother, Fang Yu-hu. It's about female education under Japanese colonial rule. And we have a forthcoming title, in 2025 by Lev Nachman, about kind of contested sovereignty and how it influences internal politics in Taiwan. So we anticipate to have about one title a year from here on out. Then I wanted to say a little bit more about our YouTube channel. We have a social media presence. We planned this fairly early on, but the pandemic really kind of forced our hand to go into this full with both feet. So we live stream most of our events directly to YouTube, and then we publish event recordings on our YouTube channel. So we have both in-person audiences and we have online audiences. And of course, the latter exceeds the former in size by quite a bit. I mentioned in-house videography. How do we do this? At first, we hired professional video companies to do the work, and we discovered very quickly that we couldn't afford it. So we decided to do it ourselves. Over time, we bought streaming software and cameras and microphones and switchboards and lighting, basically a portable studio. And we trained our student assistants to produce our programs. And now our students can do everything from setup to editing. And they train each other in these skills. And sometimes they train us how to do it too, so that we can help out. And I mentioned the arts and culture program. It was funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for 5 years. We hired a film scholar, Ellen Zhang, to head the program. And it collaborates with local and Taiwan organizations to present Taiwan arts and culture content locally and regionally. And I'm going to provide some examples of these programs and what they do. It's a very active program. Last April, we had a program memorializing the ethnologist and documentarian Hu Tai-li. And this included a poster exhibit at the library, an evening program at the Burke Museum, and an online film festival of Hu's documentaries. And the evening program featured a screening of one of Who's early ethnographic films and a talk by Scott Simon, a specialist on Taiwan Indigenous society. In October of this year, no, last year, October 23, we put on Kuroshio Odyssey, which was a series of events highlighting Eastern Taiwan's indigenous communities. And this included a hybrid exhibit of cultural materials assisted by guest curators from Taiwan and New Zealand. Events included a book exhibit at the East Asia Library, an exhibit of material culture at the Burke Museum, film screenings and workshops and panel discussions of indigenous cultural and land rights issues, bringing together indigenous Taiwan cultural workers and others interested in Pacific Islander and Pacific Northwest indigenous communities. We collaborated with the Hualien County Indigenous Museum and the Indigenous Peoples Cultural Development Center in Pingtung County. I guess it's Pingtung City now. Another one, in April and May, we collaborated with the Taipei Music Center, a month-long celebration of Taiwan pop music. This included an exhibit at the Allen Library, a public roundtable discussion featuring pop diva Kei Huang, who also heads the Taipei Music Center, and a performance of Taiwan pop songs at the UW School of Music. These were all excellent and successful productions, I must say, but I want to make another point about this, which is, these brought specialists from Taiwan to Seattle at considerable expense, and we didn't share costs and benefits of these programs with any other institution. So they were kind of self-contained within the university. And following these programs, there was no tour or any other use of the work that was done. So my sense is that maybe in some cases, this is not the most rational economic way to organize these complex events. Had we done some cost sharing, we might have done them both more economically, and we could have expanded our audience, and possibly, potentially, collaboration with other programs could have increased the depths of these programs by taking advantage of other intellectual resources that are available in our neighborhood here on the West Coast. I wanted to mention a few of the ways we actually do share costs. We have shared expenses with UCLA and UT Austin, and we recently made some agreements with UC San Diego, University of Puget Sound, and the University of Toronto, all in bringing scholars and from Taiwan to the US to present books and other materials. And we have some examples of collaborations on workshops. We did put on the Fourth World Congress of Taiwan Studies, which was a collaboration with the Institute of Sociology of Academia Sinica. We co-sponsored a conference called Taiwan in Transition in 2023 with the University of Nottingham Taiwan Research Hub. And we have some things now on the drawing boards, new directions in Taiwan history workshops with Princeton and UC Berkeley. So the first of these is going to be February of 2025, and it's going to be focused on colonial and post-colonial histories, and that will be at Princeton University. And then subsequent workshops will be at UW and then at Berkeley. There's so much other things that we could talk about, and I'm sure we will at some point, but these are some of the questions that I thought of, and it just we're not mentioning. For example, so how do we build solidarity among students who are research on Taiwan? How do we build a research capability in Taiwan studies? How do we navigate University of Washington's evolving administrative ecosystem, which is, has been an issue, and how do we fund and sustain our program now and in the future? So I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to learning from all of you about how to build and run a Taiwan Studies program.
Hi, everyone. It's very exciting to be here today, joining the celebration of the launch of Taiwan Study programs at Stanford. It's amazing to see such a great turnout, showing how much interest there is here. I'm wishing you, Professor of Sociology at UCLA. Unlike Bill, I'm not director of a Taiwan study program, so I'm not going to talk about details, although I've been in various steering committee of Taiwan programs, but I think I will focus, I'm not going to be able to document details about all the activities of Taiwan study programs at UCLA, even though it is actually one of the very vibrant and active programs under the Asian Pacific Center at UCLA. I am more, but I've been working on Taiwan, publishing research, doing research, publishing on Taiwan for many years. I thought I could be here, talked about what we can make Taiwan more visible in academic world. What can we do to make Taiwanese research on Taiwan more central? When I start thinking about this topic, I was thinking, why do we want to study Taiwan? Well, I'm sure you're here. I probably don't need to convince you, but just out of curiosity, as I start thinking about this topic, I thought, let me see how Taiwan has been talked about, how much Taiwan has been talked about in the English-speaking world. So this is from Google Book Ngram Viewer. It shows from 1920 to now how much Taiwan, people who sit in the back, sorry, apologize for such a small font, but you probably won't be able to see it, but nonetheless, you can see that this is how Taiwan has shown up in all the books Google has scanned over time. So roughly, this is about 90s, early 90s to mid 90s. That's where Taiwan got the most attention. This is kind of in line with what Ji would just say. It got the most attention and then it slowly declined. And if we put this in context, okay, so this is China. The orange line here is China. The red line here is Japan. So you see the up and down. Japan got the most attention in 1980s, early 90s. And this is the green one is Korea. The blue one is Taiwan. So roughly, slightly after Japan, following the economic development trajectories and kind of in proportion to the country size. So this is how much Taiwan has been talked about in English-speaking world. Because Taiwan is a small country, and I'll go back to the thing over and over, doesn't mean it's not important. Why do we want to study Taiwan? We can argue that Taiwan has traditionally been receiving a lot of influences from Japan, China, and very interconnected with other countries in Asia. So it serves as a window to look into Asia more generally. It's also one of the few, probably the only Chinese society, majority Han Chinese society that has a fully functional and successful democracy, which gives a lot, to learn. Give us a lot to learn. It had geopolitically, everybody knows it has a very important and potentially perilous position. It's a site for, like many late industrializing societies, it went through demographic, the political, technological, cultural change within such a short period of time. For social scientists, that's really exciting. We don't need to go back a lot to histories to understand how macro social changes can potentially affect individuals. And Taiwan, of course, have a very unique relation to the US and can particularly be an interest to US audience. Now, the Taiwanese, any Taiwan study program, Taiwan study program typically would do, Bill gives us great presentation of UW has been doing, and that's a lot. In a way, so I can probably skip that part. UCLA Taiwan study is under Asian Pacific Program Center, which is, I think, similar in structure as Stanford. What we've been doing is actually not that different from UW. It provides fundings for research, for people to visit Taiwan. It offers classes. It provides funding for collaboration. The UCLA's Taiwan study program has very close tie with a couple universities in Taiwan, particularly National Taiwan Normal University and National Taiwan University now just starting as well. So we have annual conferences with NTNU where they send people over, or we send people to Taiwan to co-host conferences on certain things every year. What's more unique about the UCLA Taiwan study is that UCLA is in LA. The great LA area has probably the biggest older Taiwanese diaspora, Taiwanese community. So which allow UCLA and also encourage UCLA to have more community outreach. So in our talk series, we don't just have talk series on campus with academic only. We also encourage talks that in the community where more older Taiwanese immigrant community are, and try to attract general audience to such talks. So that's probably more unique condition UCLA has. And that's similar to Stanford in a way, because Stanford is in the Bay Area. Bay Area has the most new Taiwanese immigrants, and a lot of them are in high-tech sectors, relatively wealthy, which allow a lot of fundraising opportunities. And I heard Stanford has been very successful at that, which is great. And also, like UCLA in California, that means there are possibly a lot of students with great interest in Taiwan study, because there are a good amount of students. I've never met so many Taiwanese Americans until I moved to LA. So, there are a lot of Taiwanese students, a lot of Taiwanese Americans I met are second generation. So, this is the area, California is where you'll find people who may not want to major in Taiwan studies, but curious enough because they want to know where their grandparents come from, their parents come from. They will take a course on Taiwan. So there's a lot of student interest, which makes this basically the whole West Coast perfect settings for promoting Taiwan study. But of course, we don't just want to promote Taiwan studies among people who have ancestors from Taiwan. We want people to pay more attention to Taiwan, and people who study Taiwan to make our research more visible. Ultimately, that means we need to find a way to draw attention to research on Taiwan. And to talk about the difficulty to draw attention to Taiwan partly has to do with the challenges Taiwan study inherently face. The major challenge really is the size of the community. So aside from the fact that, so we talked about, there used to be more interest and now there's less, etc. But a lot of it is still ultimately rooted in Taiwan is a relatively small country. It's an interesting country, has a lot to offer, but it is a small country, which means the community is small. Well, I'm a sociologist, so I'm gonna talk from sociologist point of view. I think in Taiwan, there are probably 200 sociologists in total. In the US, we're talking about 5,000, 3,000 to 5,000, depending on whether you count students. So sociologists, so that's just a very huge difference. And when the community is small, the problem of it is that it's harder to get, well, for one thing, for us who do research on Taiwan, it's harder for when I send out a research article, it's harder to find good reviewer for the research article. It's harder to find someone who knows anything and has any appreciation of anything happening in Taiwan. That's just the fact. It's harder to sustain a long-term talk series with prominent scholars keep coming giving talks because the community is small. So for all these reasons, ultimately, I would say the way to make Taiwan more visible is to make Taiwan part of a bigger context. Ultimately, if we want to make Taiwan research on Taiwan more visible, it requires more people interested in Taiwan. Now, let's face it. Well, again, speaking of as a sociologist, sociology, many of the people here I deal with sociologists. Sociology in its origin ultimately assumes we can use principles, theories developed from given societies to infer to the world. The idea is always to develop generalizable principle theories, whether it's practically realistic, that's a separate issue. But sociologists fundamentally don't care as much about other contexts, non-Western contexts, as other disciplines. Because if you think of political scientists, the political science, the unit of analysis is society, therefore international community, every unit is part of the community. While sociologists always tend to believe that principles, theories developed from Western society can be generalizable to every, and that's the goal anyway. So given that, when we think about how to get more attention on Taiwan, how to study Taiwan, how to make Taiwanese research noticeable and publishable, really what's important to think about when the Taiwan case can possibly add to existing theories. And when I talk to scholars from Taiwan, they often talk about how unfair it is. People often feel like there's a great pressure to publish in international journals, but international journals don't care about Taiwan. I would say I work on many different countries. I work on Japan, I work on Mexico, I work on basically anywhere else other than the US, but even US, I'll go back to that. Anywhere else you work, you have to think that's partly what the discipline is. The discipline cares about generalizable theories, doesn't care about individual areas. So wherever you do, you have to think about what the case can help us understand new theories. And the benefit, the positive side, the silver lining is that we do have a new case. That when you deal with a new country, when you deal with a different context from the Western context, you ultimately have a chance to use things that people who observe Western context cannot see to tell you something new. And that's exciting. If you look at US, in the US, there are tons of research on every topic I can think of. While when you work on Taiwan, there might be some contextual issue that doesn't exist in the US that can allow us to add to new theory. So along that line, I would say, even when I work on the US, ultimately you have to think what you have that's unique can possibly contribute to theory. So in Taiwan, I can think of many unique issues one can study and would possibly be theoretically informative. So for example, Taiwan is the first country in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage. I met several people who are studying legalization of same-sex marriage, gay parade and whatever issues, who have no interest in Taiwan otherwise, went to Taiwan and studied Taiwan because Taiwan is unique in that regard. Taiwan has gone through experiencing drastic demographic changes like other East Asian countries. That makes it very interesting how Taiwan is similar, different from Japan, Korea, China. That's interesting topics to study. Scholars from China told me that the traditional Chinese family values basically disappear in China now after the external shock of communism. So Taiwan is a perfect setting for understanding how the traditional Chinese family norms interact with global forces and shape today's Taiwanese family dynamics. And Taiwan has national health insurance that serves as a perfect natural experiment to see how this kind of an universal health insurance can improve population health. And of course, everybody knows there's conflict with China. And then the other thing to think about when we think about how to do research, how to publish on Taiwan, is there, to think about if there are unique data that can potentially add to the knowledge. So for example, the Taiwanese, the national universal health insurance system allowed Taiwanese government to basically have a database of the whole population's health when they go to doctors, what kind of diagnosis they get, what kind of medicine they get. You have all the information. I see that in medical journals all the time using Taiwan as cases, because in the US, you don't have such thing. Like I see several other articles using administrative data in Taiwan. So think about, so that's the way I see it, to promote research on Taiwan. But then fundamentally, it's also important to know that oftentimes people who don't study a country would not read stuff. about another country. So people who don't, that goes to any country. People who don't study Taiwan would not pick up a book on Taiwan. People who don't study Japan would not pick up a book on Japan. That's just most people, that's, we all have tons of things to do, a lot to read. That's just how things are. So the way to do it, to make people who are not interested in Taiwan to learn something about Taiwan, perhaps is to put Taiwan in a larger context. So for example, a conference on international relations with Taiwan-China tension as part of it may attract people who otherwise wouldn't be interested in Taiwan to learn something about Taiwan. A conference about demographic family changes in East Asia can potentially have all the people who study other part of Asia or East Asia to learn something on Taiwan when Taiwan is part of it. Oftentimes, I find it works out very well when I've been to a couple conferences like that, when the conferences follow up with like special issue in peer review journals, because that encourages everybody who participate in the conference to ultimately make the conference presentation into something publishable. And then everybody in the conference and people they know end up learning something about Taiwan. As the Taiwan program, Taiwan study program can potentially start a working paper series, perhaps jointly with major institutions in Taiwan that will increase opportunities for collaborations. And then when I talked about this idea of having conference that's bigger and beyond Taiwan, but including Taiwan, would be a way to expand the community that have more interest. I go to conference, I don't usually work on Korea, for example, but I go to conferences where people talk about Korea, and I'm like, oh, this is very interesting. I'm gonna study that country next time. So this happens. And then as from institutions' point of view, providing funding for collaboration with scholars in Taiwan is always a good way because that expand the community. And then the last thing I want to say is I think it's really important for the various Taiwan study programs across US universities to join force, because I started saying the major challenge Taiwan faces, it's a small country, the community is small, and for the small community to become sustainable, lasting, it required people. It required more people working together. So each Taiwan study program having their own activity is great, but doing things together perhaps can be even more rewarding and perhaps can allow this more activities to go on. So anyway, I was told not to talk too long. I don't know how much time I spent. So I'm gonna stop here so we'll have more time for.
Well, I want to begin by congratulating Stanford for having launched the Taiwan Studies program. It is a very special and wonderful opportunity for me to come together with my fellow panelists to share our experience in promoting Taiwan studies in the North American context, and also to think about its broader international ramifications, especially US-Taiwan connections and collaborations. So today I thought that I would take this opportunity to introduce the Center for Taiwan Studies at UC Santa Barbara, and just to share my kind of vision for the center's path in the next 5 years or so. I want to actually back up a little bit and just to say very quickly that the center was actually established by my predecessor, Professor Du Guoqing, back in 2003. And ever since 2004, the Ministry of Education has been supporting us financially, primarily through the Taipei and Economic Cultural Office based in LA. That's kind of our point of contact to help us provide support for the center to build a Taiwan Studies program on campus. So Du Guoqing is upper left-hand corner. So his office is now my office in the department. So he retired in December 2020. And my colleague, Sabina Frühstück, took over and served as the interim director until I think it was June 2023. And that's when they appointed me to take over in 2023. Currently, we do these 5-year funding cycles. And the last funding cycle with MOE basically ended in November of this year. And because of that, I've been able to get a renewal for another 5 years. So from basically this month to 2029, this will be our new 5-year funding cycle from the Ministry of Education. Given my background, I'm trained as a historian of science, historian of gender and sexuality. So the issues of cultural diversity, medical science, healthcare, as well as social justice is very important to my own research and my teaching. And I think that distinguishes the kind of tenor of our center, what we do, what we promote, from some of the other programs and centers in the Western world. I hope that in the next 5 years, some of the goals I hope to accomplish include the continual kind of mainstreaming of Taiwan studies, to give Taiwan studies more visibility, both on campus, but also internationally speaking. And of course, this is more of a selfish hope to promote Center for Taiwan Studies at UC Santa Barbara in a way that goes beyond the regional context and make greater global international connections as well. So the title of my 5-year project is actually called Taiwan in the Relational World. And in this context, I like to think about Taiwan, its connection to different regional context and elements of the globalizing world. I think at this point in time, it is very imperative for us to think about the broader implications of Taiwan studies beyond Taiwan, following basically what my two other panelists have said, but also to use this as an opportunity, perhaps to demonstrate that scholars of other fields or other areas can find value in being connected to Taiwan studies. Because of its institutional base, so at UC Santa Barbara, I think I forgot to mention that our Chancellor Yang, who's stepping down this year, but he was instrumental, he's from Taiwan, he's instrumental for establishing Taiwan studies on campus. And because of that, there are I guess I have two major goals in the next 5 years. One is more immediate, and that is to increase UCSB's international visibility in Taiwan studies, but also to think about how UCSB can be connected to an increasingly thriving network of Taiwan studies scholars. I think one key to do this, and this is where I depart from the approach of my predecessor a little bit. I think that bridging the divide between the humanities and social sciences are very crucial. And so that is something that I will continue to do by not prioritizing any specific discipline associated with the center. And to do so, I think will help us generate ideas about doing Taiwan studies. The second goal is more long-term, and that's to enhance Taiwan studies at UCSB. So many people don't know this, but we actually did propose, we had a conversation with global studies, with the deans, to establish the second endowed chair in Taiwan and Asia-Pacific studies on campus. For a host of reasons, this is back in 2017, it kind of didn't work out. And so with the current kind of Taiwan studies program promoted by the National Science and Technology Council, we hope to regenerate and revisit that conversation. And very important is to, of course, think about collaborating formally with institutions in Taiwan. So this is a conference that co-organized last year with my friend Shu Mei from UCLA, actually. So as you know, UCLA has this strong collaboration relationship with NTNU. So we kind of continue to evolve from that collaboration as well. I'm hoping that by the end of this Taiwan in the Relational World 5-year project, that UCSB will be able to sign an MOU with at least one Taiwan-based institution to think about collaborations in teaching, research, conferences, so on and so forth. And finally, over the next 5 years, we also hope to do more fundraising. As you know, it's very important and crucial for the success of a center on campus and beyond. So I'm putting this picture up because I think one of the highlights of being a center director is to be invited to parties. And this is, I guess, a party hosted by TECO in LA to celebrate the 113th National Celebration Day. And so there, that's a very important social gathering and important occasion to meet potential fundraisers. In addition to Taiwan Studies courses, we also support the Department of East Asian Language and Cultural Studies, as well as our language instructor, Chen Shujian, who is responsible for promoting Chinese language instructions on campus, but also organizing cultural studies events. So we support, like, for example, the Lunar New Year event, as well as the Taiwanese night market that's held annually at Santa Barbara. So one of the things that UCSB has with National Taiwan Normal University is an MOU in place to promote the Huayu Best program. We can talk about this in greater detail in a Q&A, but this is something that happens under the aegis of the Ministry of Education and then promotes the teaching and instruction of Chinese language. We also send students abroad to NTNU, for example, for Chinese language. We also offer several awards and research grants to promote and support undergraduate and graduate studies in Taiwan-related research. In fact, in my proposal to the Ministry of Education, I allocate a substantial portion to train the next generation of undergraduate and graduate students in Taiwan-related studies. With respect to library holding, our library has a strong collection of items in Taiwan studies, including 160 titles of periodicals, 400 titles about Taiwan in Japanese studies, and 160 items in the Bai Xianyong Kenneth Bai collection. So he was actually instrumental for founding our Department of East Asian Studies at UCSB. So my goal also in the next 5 years is to continue this robust expansion of our library acquisition to make UCSB one of the premier locations to conduct Taiwan-related studies in North America. One of the most distinctive features of my plan next 5 years is the new book series that we just launched this year with Columbia University Press called New Perspectives on Taiwan. And when proposing this this book series, I had several ideas in mind. And one of the most important things is to provide a platform for scholars based in Taiwan to publish their work and make it known to the English language world. Some of you may know this, but there are a lot of scholars in Taiwan who get their PhDs in the US and they go back. But because of the educational institutional structures in Taiwan, oftentimes their PhD dissertation don't really get turned into books because that don't always necessarily count. In fact, most of them doesn't. And I think such a huge loss for that kind of lack of engagement or lack of publicity on their work, because that's actually important research too for their dissertation. So it provides that kind of platform for them. I also value quite drastically the discussions of transnational issues in this book series, as well as cross-disciplinary methodologies. I think that it's important, increasingly important, that we connect to digital media and digital literacy. And perhaps above all, one of the most distinguishing elements of this book series is to foster a capacity of self-critique. I think that's an important thing that will continue to drive Taiwan studies forward, something that we can do in Taiwan, but not in every other countries. Okay, so finally, I just want to say a few words about our programming. Our programming is divided into 3 major series: Taiwan Talks, Global Queer Asias, and Taiwan Studies workshop, our on-campus events have so far attracted roughly from 20 to 260 attendees from all over the world. The Taiwan Talks series is our flagship event. It features a more traditional kind of talk format, followed by Q&A session to demonstrate or showcase actually the latest research emerging out of the field of Taiwan studies. The new event series that I created after I took over is Global Queer Asias. As you know, Taiwan kind of sits at the forefront of sexual politics in the Asia-Pacific region. So under this series, I invite both Taiwan and non-Taiwan experts alike to come together to engage with debates about gender politics and sexual diversity, to think about the continual momentum for making Taiwan an important beacon for thinking about these issues, both regionally and globally. And last but not least, Taiwan Studies Workshop is something that I give graduate students in particular. So it's supported by my center, but it's completely run by graduate students, for them to invite and engage with early career scholars. Some of them may not have published their work yet, but have only recently graduated from their PhD programs. Events in this series is entirely devoted to fostering discussions of recent research work by early career scholars. So with the renewed funding from the Ministry of Education, we will continue to organize similar events. And as I said, because the theme of our center in the next 5 years is Taiwan in the relational world, one of the things that I've been trying to do is to have an annual theme. So the annual theme for this year, 2024 and 2025, is Taiwan and Asian America. And because of that, I've become really close friends with my colleagues in the Department of Asian American Studies. And there's a growing interest in Taiwanese American Studies as well. Next year, I believe we'll be focusing on the connection between Taiwan and Southeast Asia. The year following that, we'll be looking at Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Asia Pacific. That's where I can hoping to invite more scholars of Japan and Korea into the discussion. And in one of the years, we'll have annual theme devoted to Taiwan and global Asias. All of this, I hope, will help us, fold into this larger investigation of Taiwan in a relational world, but also culminating in a major conference that we intend to organize in 2028. So I actually have prepared some pointers about Taiwan studies growth in the last 10 years or so, but I think I can save that for our discussion because I think I've run over my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Fascinating presentations. I learned a lot. But before getting into conversation, let me give some updates to those who would like to know more about our Taiwan program. So we are new. We already have a postdoc, Liu Fan. Liu Fan, you wanna wave your hands? Yeah. So our postdoc. And then we are doing search for senior faculty right now. So even though I'm now running Taiwan program, I cannot claim my expertise on Taiwan. I'm more like a transitional person to find a senior person. So that's going to happen hopefully next year. And then we have a visiting fellowship. So especially we like to bring some scholar from Taiwan. So if you have any good candidates, I think there's an announcement in our website. The deadline is March 4th. So, and then we're gonna have a conference in Taipei, March 23rd at NTU campus. So if you happen to be in Taipei, please join us in Taiwan. Okay, I'm gonna bring up two issues. One is it's great to hear a lot of good activities on your campus. But I think one issue is kind of a relationship between Taiwan studies and Chinese studies, right? Because when we are talking about establishing Taiwan studies, I talked to my colleague working on China. having Taiwan studies at the center would affect your work on or in China. Okay, so I'm saying in all your three places, you have a very strong program on China. So what's the relationship between China and Taiwan studies? More collaboration? It's just your own way. So any like challenges? What's your situation on your campus? Well, it's not an issue.
UCLA's Asian Pacific Center doesn't include China. There's a separate center for Chinese studies. So in a way, the Taiwan studies is under a different umbrella from Chinese studies. The Chinese Studies Center director, I think it's also APC's faculty committee, advisory committee. So there's some relationship, but generally the activities are separate. It's not quite like, yeah, it's there doesn't seem to, and then because the current Chinese studies director is more a cultural study person. I think cultural study part of Taiwan study and the Chinese study go very well together. There's as far as I know, I haven't heard any potential conflicts, but UCLA's Taiwan study program is heavily funded by Taiwan's government. So that occasionally does, there are times when the TICO want us to focus on certain topics in the talk series and the faculty vetoed it. Or we want to talk about certain things and the TICO feel it might be too sensitive. So there are issues occasionally that happen. So when we organize things, the Taiwan-China tension does come into play. But I would say that has more to do with UCLA's strong relationship with TICO. They have their own political concern. I don't think the Chinese studies per se have any problem with that. That's my answer.
Santa Barbara, UW.
So at Santa Barbara, we don't have a Center for Chinese Studies, like a separate Center for Chinese Studies. I think we can talk about this in two different ways. One has to do with teaching, instruction, and I think the other would be, I think, more kind of research oriented. Like teaching wise, one of the things I was hoping to talk about was the ending of the Confucius Institute, most North American campuses. So this happened a while ago. But so before I got there, Santa Barbara did have a Confucius Institute alongside with the Center for Taiwan Studies within the same department. Now that the Confucius Institute has ended, I think that the Taiwan's government, Ministry of Education, does see that as an opportunity for stepping in to ramp up or get more involved in Chinese language instruction. That is where I talk about the Huayu Best program kind of comes in. So there's that. I think that also teaching-wise, most places where if you're hired to be able to teach about Taiwan, sometimes you're often expected to teach a bit about China. That happens in different places where, especially if the program is smaller. Personally, I think that research can be tricky, right? So I was trained as a China historian as well. And I do some China history as well. And if I want to go to the archives in the PRC, I would just be very delicate about what I say when I'm there. But wearing the Taiwan Studies Center director hat, I think there is kind of implications and personally as a researcher, one would want to navigate that very carefully.
Yeah. So I'd say first that our Taiwan Studies program is administrative and fiscally completely independent from Chinese studies. So it's very, very clean division. However, we have very close relationship with China studies. We're very cooperative. We actually collaborate on some things. For example, if we have a speaker who speaks both to kind of Taiwan studies and Chinese studies. We cooperate with China Studies program on those events and share the costs and such things. Also, a lot of our students in Taiwan studies are recruited from China Studies in some sense. They're working on China, they're working on Taiwan as well. The other thing I would say is not just about China, but we have a great China Studies program at UW. We actually have very good Japan studies and Korea studies as well. And that makes UW a great place to do Taiwan studies. Taiwan studies is just inherently transnational, and part of Taiwan studies is to learn about Taiwan's neighborhood. So that's very helpful to us. And we haven't had any political issues of the kind that you've spoken of at all.
Okay, thank you. Let me raise one more issue, then we can turn to the audience. So certainly, we are latecomer. Okay, so you guys already established years ago. Now we are just starting. So going back to 2001, when I was establishing in a Korea program, so I moved from UCLA, large center on Korean studies. So when I got here, I think I'm just like a startup, because I was the only faculty in Korean studies. And then I didn't want to replicate what other places are doing. So I think niche was that we're going to focus on social science and trying to bridge between academic and policy communities. And now we have 5 faculties in Korean studies, including myself. So we grew a lot. But then, as you mentioned, it's very hard to do on Korea in social science, right? It's very hard to get a job or tenure. So it's still quite challenging, but I think we are doing better than other places. Okay, now keeping that in mind, so the question is, what are we going to focus on Taiwan? So if you're looking at Stanford, what would you like to focus on? Because I don't think we wanted to replicate or compete with other places, or more supplementary and maybe filling up a niche. So what, you mentioned about our location, Silicon Valley. So what would you like us to focus on from your perspective? So how we can make a synergy impact on Taiwan studies in the country and beyond as a whole. So give us one suggestion before you go.
My suggestion is to focus on what Bay Area can offer. Okay. So I already said that, a little bit you mentioned. I think Bay Area is very interesting in that it has a lot of new immigrants. So Taiwan study has to go beyond Taiwan to also look at Taiwan diaspora as well. And Bay Area has a unique kind of high skill immigrants from Taiwan. And that's also closely linked to Taiwan's technologies, high-tech sectors, which is very closely, it's the center of the talk whenever everybody talks about Taiwan-China conflicts. Taiwan provides chips all over the world. So this high-tech sector and their connection to Bay Area and different type of, because in the US, the immigration study, oftentimes is talking about low-skill immigrants in the U.S. So Bay Area provides a unique place for high-skill immigrants who are somewhat assimilated because they're high-skill, but still, I find the community very interesting because it's a community where people know each other from. My experience with my Bay Area friends is that you go to a Taiwanese breakfast restaurant, you'll meet someone you went to college with, and you can pretty much use Chinese and stay in your very original kind of lifestyle and still live in the U.S. And I think that kind of immigration assimilation process is very interesting and different from the typical immigration study in the U.S. So that's one possible thing to focus on.
Great, thank you. Howard, Beer.
Well, although Stanford may be a little late to the party, I think that
Not too late.
it's certainly not too late. And Stanford has some amazing kind of positional advantages. And as was just mentioned, I think, some kind of specialization on semiconductors and computer engineering, that kind of thing would really be so, such a great comparative advantage that you have here. And you have just great resources which can bring people from Taiwan, and that would be a very advantageous to us in Seattle to have, use kind of Stanford as a gateway and way to collaborate with you. So
we can send to North and South.
Yeah, I guess I have two kind of general kind of suggestions. One would be, so obviously AI is one of the things that have made Taiwan making headlines recently. But Taiwan also offers different other things to the world. Bubble tea seems to very not attractive in comparison to AI. But I mentioned that just to stress the point that I think it will be really useful to think about what makes Taiwan stands out and what is Taiwan's strength. And so this can vary from person to person, whose specialization can differ, right? So that would be a good approach to think about what really makes Taiwan stand out, both in terms of its strengths and weaknesses. We haven't really get to talk about this, but Taiwan's migrant population has increased drastically over the last decade, and really has made Taiwan a very multicultural world. There's growing interest in indigenous rights and settler colonialism in Taiwan as well. And that connects Taiwan to other parts of theoretical discourses in many interesting ways. So I think there are ways when you can showcase the strengths and weaknesses of Taiwan. And I guess the second recommendation that I would have is for the leader, whoever comes to assume the leadership position here, I think I would definitely recommend someone who would be more flexible and versatile in terms of their disciplinary orientation. Like I'm mostly familiar with, I have a lot of friends in Taiwan literature, and some of them are not really willing to go beyond literature, only literature. And I think that could be a cause for concern for the future of Taiwan studies. And I would prefer to see someone who's more disciplinarily kind of versatile and flexible in that sense. I think that's going to be good.
Yeah. And also, within Stanford, actually, there are two other kind of entity or project on Taiwan. One is a technology hub. So it's more on science and technology. And the Hoover has Taiwan project, more focused on geopolitics. So I think within Stanford, we're trying to have a good balance and trying to maximize synergy impact. So, okay, I think we got about like 10 to 15 minutes left. So maybe we can take questions. Maybe we can take any student here. Yeah, okay.
To play pessimist for a second, it seems like science is great.
Just one second, yeah. So can you say who you are?
Yeah, I'm Brady. I'm in the AALC doing Chinese literature. So I guess to play the pessimist a little, like it's really exciting that the Taiwan programs are getting more attention, especially as things happen. This United States universities kind of changed their Chinese language education from mainland over to Taiwan. But there's also that real possibility that Taiwan is going to be subsumed into China in, like the next decade or whatever it is. And so it seems like a lot of the money for these programs is coming from the Taiwanese government. And so what would a future of Taiwan studies look like if Taiwan just is China? And I don't know, like where that money would instantly dry up and opportunities would disappear. I'm just curious to know if that's something that has been thought about or talked about in circles. Thank you.
So you wanted to respond? Or?
I can jump in very quickly. So I think that there are two ways to think about this, right? One is that for a long time, Taiwan studies was established kind of in response, right, to the fact that it has always been studied as part of Chinese studies. So there's a resistance motivation there, which is needed and important. And I think from that perspective, it gives Taiwan studies some autonomy. And as what you're trying to suggest, right, it seems that that motif is going to be less and less likely to work in Taiwan's favor. So personally, I think that it would be good to think about in the future, in the prospect of Taiwan studies, to think about modes of either collaboration or modes of communication between Taiwan and the PRC government. If not for the independent autonomy of Taiwan studies, but somehow to maintain its status quo. That's one fatal aspect of Taiwan studies. I think that we would do well to move beyond, to do a complete separation from China or China studies. So in my own field, like history, if you look at the historical sources in Chinese archives, they're all written in traditional Chinese before 1949. So Taiwan has this advantage. And I think that by not engaging with China actually does a huge disservice to Taiwan. And geopolitically, earlier this year, the Chinese government has already done all sorts of different things implicitly to pressure Taiwan on the international global legal level. But Taiwan doesn't always have the skills and capacity to come to the negotiation table. It used to have some, but now it's getting weaker and weaker. So I think that one way to answer your question is that I would want to see more of that connection or communication be maintained in some kind of fashion.
I think regarding funding, for the record, we didn't get any money from the government. Okay, so we are very lucky to have very strong supporters from Taiwan. So all the money we got for Taiwan program is all private. So I made it very clear on day one, we're not going to get any money from the Taiwanese government because it can quite complicated in many different regions. So at least for us, at least for now, there's no money from government, not even a cent. So for the record. So maybe Pei-Chai or Meredith, Pei-Chai?
Hi, I'm a sociologist, normally based at National Taiwan University, but I'm visiting fellow at Stanford this year. So thanks for the very inspiring talks. And I agree very much. We had to situate Taiwan study in a broader context. And I think you also briefly mentioned that comparative studies and also transnational studies are very useful, productive research strategy. And my question is, as institution, what can we do to promote and support research strategy like transnational comparative study to enhance the general implication of Taiwan study? Thank you.
I think what University of Washington is doing and also Santa Barbara, having the book series, monograph series with Taiwan as part of it is useful. Part of it is if there's an outlet, then more people will be encouraged to study Taiwan. I think right now, I actually think there are a lot of young Taiwanese scholars in the US who are not studying Taiwan. They are from Taiwan, they might have interest in Taiwan, they're not studying Taiwan for practical reasons, because it's hard to publish on Taiwan. If there are more prominent outlets, then people can envision getting a job, getting tenure, and then more people will work on it, the community can be bigger. So one thing, for example, like Stanford could do is to also talk to Stanford University Press, maybe not specific series on Taiwan only, but somewhat East Asia series.
We already have.
Yeah, you already have, with Taiwan as part of it. But with book series, the problem is always that book editors want books that will sell. So if it's on Taiwan only, the chance of selling is less. So that makes it harder.
We are subsidizing, so.
Okay, that's good to know. Next time when I write a paper, write a book. Next time when I write a book, I'll talk to you. But anyway, and then like I think perhaps, so I propose institutional can do is institutions can have more smaller kind of conference workshop where you center on given thing and then publish special issue in peer-reviewed journals that also provide outlets for people to publish individual research on it. And related to that, I was thinking about example. I'm a social demographer, and not too long, the UC, University of California campuses now have all UC demography conferences every once in a while. So gathering all the population study centers and their people together have a conference. I was thinking what Stanford could do, because geographically it's in the middle. Stanford can host, maybe this can rotate. Stanford, starting host the West Coast Taiwan study or East Asian study conferences. The benefit of East Asian rather than just Taiwan study is that then you also get people in other part of Asia, and then the outcome of it might have broader interest. It's easier to sell to a journal as a special issue and get more people involved, more people hearing about Taiwan. So that's one possibility, because it's easier transportation, people are more likely to participate, and then it could build communities in some way, collaborations, again, geographic proximity could help. So this is the kind of thing I can imagine institutions could do, try to actively create more collaborative opportunities, also including providing funding for, and I forgot to say at UCLA, one of the main things the Taiwan program did is also to provide tuition subsidy for Taiwanese students coming to UCLA to study, because the UC system charge international students extra out-of-state tuition, which discourage many departments to admit international students. So the individual centers, so Taiwan study programs has been help subsidizing the extra cost when departments are willing to admit Taiwan students. That also help expand community. So I would imagine those are the ways to providing money also for people here to collaborate with people in Taiwan. Those are things institutions could do.
Okay, so maybe last question or comment.
Great. Hi, I'm Dylan Davis at the UC Berkeley Institute of East Asian Studies. We have a small Taiwan program. It's called the U.S. Taiwan Next Generation Working Group. It's a capacity building program. Hopefully we'll be able to launch a third cohort of that, and we'll make the announcement out. And so we hope to receive a lot of applications for that. But my question is about the UW and the Columbia University Press monograph series. How are those funded? Are there subventions that go into that, or are they fully funded by the various presses and the editorial costs and all that goes into a publication series? Thank you.
Yeah, just briefly for the UW series, we do provide a $5,000 subvention for each book, and it's provided by the Taiwan Ministry of Education.
Yeah, for us too. When I made that collaboration, I factored in the subvention costs into my proposal to the MO Ministry of Education 5-year cycle grant that I discussed. I did also allocate some funding to hold book manuscript workshops for our prospective authors, so that, and that can happen in different stages, whether in the early on or later on. But yes, I forget the exact amount. My memory is not helping me to now, but there's some amounts that we have to agree to work with Columbia University Press. Yeah.
Okay, so I think time is up, so you can maybe stay to talk to them more. I think this is the last event for the Taiwan program, actually the last event for the center as well, right? And then really appreciate our friends and supporters in Taiwan, really, to make this possible. And then thank you for coming, and then happy holidays. Thank you.